There is a strange moment in every human life, a quiet fracture in the rhythm of our becoming. You wake one morning and realize the person you've been is not the person you truly are. Something inside has been watching, waiting, and now it begins to stir. For years you've tried to heal by being good, by being calm, by being kind, by being the version of yourself that others can love without question. But the truth is, that version has always been incomplete. Because healing is not about polishing the light. It is about walking back into the darkness you once abandoned. Carl Jung once said that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. He meant that the self you hide from still lives inside you. Every unspoken resentment, every buried desire, every unhealed wound that whispers through your choices, they do not vanish. They wait. You can feel it sometimes, in the tension behind a smile, in the silence after an argument, in the loneliness that lingers even when life is good. The shadow, Jung called it, not evil, not monstrous, but simply the part of you that was never allowed to live. And in your effort to become good, you exiled it. You built walls of affirmation, self-help, and spiritual words, but beneath it all, the old ache remained. You feared that facing it would make you weak, or bitter, or broken again. But healing was never about becoming soft. It was about becoming whole. Because life does not ask you to choose between light and dark. It asks you to integrate both, to see that your anger holds a plea for respect, that your fear protects your innocence, that your sadness remembers what mattered most. You are not just your calmness, you are also your storms, and the moment you turn toward them, the illusion of perfection begins to dissolve. In its place, something real begins to breathe. Something deeper than goodness, something stronger than control. This is the beginning of wholeness, not the erasure of pain, but the awakening of everything you once pushed away. It starts here, in the quiet courage to stop running from yourself, to look into the mirror of your own soul and finally whisper, "I am all of this." And in that whisper, the journey begins. Most people do not wake up one day and say, "I am ready to face my shadow." They stumble into it, through heartbreak, betrayal, exhaustion, or the slow erosion of meaning. Through nights when everything feels too heavy, and mornings when you no longer recognize your own reflection. It begins subtly. You start pretending that you're fine, that the pain is just a phase, that your anger is just stress, that your loneliness is something you can meditate away. You tell yourself that healing means smiling, forgiving, letting go. You repeat phrases you've read in self-help books. You attract what you are. You just need to raise your vibration. Everything happens for a reason. But somewhere beneath those words, a quiet voice trembles, a part of you that doesn't want to rise above everything, but to feel it. You see, repression wears many disguises. Sometimes it hides beneath politeness. Sometimes it hides beneath spiritual language. Sometimes it even hides behind your pursuit of peace. We want so desperately to be healed that we forget. Healing is not a performance. It is not a brand of serenity to display to the world. It is raw, disordered, and human. Because you cannot clean the wound by pretending it isn't there. You cannot love yourself by silencing the parts of you that still cry for attention. Every emotion you deny does not disappear. It seeps into your body, into your decisions, into your relationships. You think you've buried the pain, but it begins to speak through the way you withdraw, through the sharpness in your voice, through the fatigue that no rest can fix. The shadow finds a way to return. It always does. We live in an age of false positivity, a culture addicted to brightness. We are told that peace means comfort, that strength means never trembling, that kindness means never saying no. But this kind of light blinds us. It demands we amputate what is real, and the more we chase it, the more fragmented we become. You begin to notice how tired you are of pretending, how exhausting it is to curate your emotions, to measure your worth by how unbothered you appear. In the mirror, you catch your own eyes and realize you've been gaslighting your soul, convincing yourself you're healed because you don't cry anymore. But numbness is not peace. It is unspoken grief turned to stone. Jung understood this tension deeply, that within every good person lies a reservoir of unexpressed life. Anger that wanted to protect, desire that wanted to create, fear that wanted to keep you safe. But when those energies are denied, they do not vanish, they distort, and so you begin to repeat cycles, attracting the same kind of pain, loving people who mirror your own silence, avoiding confrontation, yet longing to be seen, until one day you reach the threshold, a breaking point disguised as surrender. You stop trying to be who you should be and start feeling what you are. It's terrifying, like stepping into a room without light. You don't know what waits there. You only know that something inside you refuses to keep hiding. And just before the revelation, there's always resistance. Because the mind fears what the soul already knows, that the pain you keep avoiding is the doorway to your wholeness. You sense it now, a subtle trembling between who you were and who you might become. And though the path ahead is dark, there is a strange calm beginning to form, because somewhere within the struggle, you realize the truth is no longer your enemy. It's your guide. And that realization changes everything. There comes a moment when the illusion finally cracks, when you stop fighting the darkness and begin to listen to it, not as an intruder, but as a messenger, because the shadow does not appear to destroy you, it appears to make you real. In Jung's language, the shadow is not the opposite of light, but its twin, the unacknowledged half of the soul that holds everything you could not bear to see. And once you begin to turn toward it, you discover something startling. It is not there to punish you, it is there to complete you, the light you show the world, your calm, your intellect, your goodness. That is only one side of the coin, but beneath it lies the other side, your wildness, your jealousy, your selfishness, your grief. The parts you denied because they were too human. The world told you these sides made you bad, but Jung saw them differently. He understood that every shadow contains unspent life, a kind of energy that, when integrated, becomes power. Your anger, when owned, becomes boundary. Your envy, when understood, becomes inspiration. Your sadness, when felt, becomes compassion. Your fear, when faced, becomes wisdom. To integrate the shadow is to take back what you once disowned, to stop splitting yourself into good and bad, saint and sinner, strong and broken, and to realize that every piece has always belonged to the same mosaic. When you hide from your darkness, you live only half a life. You speak words that sound kind, but they lack depth. You chase dreams, but they feel hollow. You love others, but secretly fear being seen. But when you bring the shadow into consciousness, life regains its texture. You begin to speak with honesty instead of performance. You stop apologizing for existing. You feel both pain and beauty with equal clarity. Wholeness, Jung wrote, is not achieved by perfection, but by the acceptance of one's own contradictions. The human soul is not a cathedral of light. It is a landscape, full of storm and soil and seed, and only when you stop dividing it do things begin to grow again. For so long you thought healing meant peace. Now you see, it means integration, the gathering of all your exiled selves. Imagine standing in front of a mirror that reflects not just your face, but your memories, your mistakes, your guilt, your hunger. Most people would turn away. But if you stay, if you look long enough, the reflection begins to soften. You see not a monster, but a child who learned to survive. Every defense you built was a kind of prayer for safety. Every mask you wore was a way to be loved. Even your shadows began as protection. You do not need to destroy them, you need to thank them, and then gently take them home. This is the revelation. Healing is not about cleansing yourself of the darkness. It's about illumination, bringing light into it so it can finally be seen, understood, and transformed. The Stoics spoke of this too. Marcus Aurelius wrote that what stands in the way becomes the way. And Jung would have agreed. What blocks your path is not a barrier, it's the path itself. Your fears are invitations. Your anger is an unfinished conversation. Your pain is the echo of something sacred, asking to be witnessed. When you stop running, you start remembering. And when you remember, you reclaim your strength. Wholeness does not mean you will never break again. It means that when you do, you will know how to hold yourself through it. With truth instead of denial, with grace instead of shame. Because to be whole is not to be perfect. It is to contain everything you are and still love yourself into being. In that moment of understanding, you realize healing was never about becoming soft. It was about becoming strong enough to face what is real. Strong enough to stop editing your humanity. Strong enough to carry both your shadow and your light without flinching. And that strength, that quiet, unshakable wholeness, is what makes you human. This is where transformation begins. Once you've seen your shadow, you can never unsee it. The illusion of who you were begins to dissolve like mist under morning light, and in its place stands something raw, unguarded, a self that no longer wants to perform healing, but live it. The question now is not why you suffer. It is how you will meet your suffering, because integration is not a single act. It's a lifelong conversation with your own soul. Every moment of anger, jealousy, fear, or sadness is another doorway through which the unconscious speaks. You no longer suppress it. You listen. You ask, what are you trying to show me? This is how awareness becomes transformation. Carl Jung believed that awareness alone is curative, that to make the unconscious conscious is to release the trapped energy within it. But that release demands courage, the courage to hold a mirror to your inner contradictions and not look away. When you begin to integrate your shadow, life itself becomes the classroom. A conversation that once triggered you becomes an opportunity to observe the ego in real time. A moment of jealousy reveals what you still yearn for. A mistake becomes the teacher that perfection never was. You begin to see that your emotions are not enemies. They are instruments, each tuned to a frequency of truth. Anger becomes a boundary. Sadness becomes honesty. Fear becomes humility. Desire becomes creation. And through this alchemy, your inner chaos becomes coherence. In relationships, this awareness changes everything. You stop trying to fix others, because you see their shadow too, not as a threat, but as a reflection of your own. You no longer need to win arguments, you seek understanding. You no longer chase validation, you practice presence. You no longer punish others for their pain, you recognize it as familiar. This is how compassion is born. Not from sentimentality, but from shared humanness. When you integrate your shadow, you stop idealizing people. You see them clearly, flawed, frightened, alive, and yet you love them more deeply than ever before, because you no longer demand that they be perfect to be worthy. Leadership transforms too. You lead not by authority, but by authenticity. You do not preach calmness, you embody it. You do not hide mistakes, you learn aloud from them. People follow wholeness, not because it's flawless, but because it's real. And in solitude, something even quieter happens. The endless noise of self-criticism begins to fade. You no longer fill silence with distraction. You sit with your mind like an old friend, listening, forgiving, allowing. You realize that healing never asked you to erase your darkness. It asked you to give it a voice. Wholeness is not about balance in the mathematical sense. It is about acceptance in the human sense, a peace that holds contradiction, a strength that does not shout, a love that includes even the parts you once feared. The Stoics would call this equanimity, the ability to remain centered amid the chaos of the world. But for Jung, it was individuation, the slow, sacred process of becoming yourself, not the self that pleases, but the self that is whole. You begin to notice your reactions are softer, your compassion deeper, your need to prove anything gone, because now the battle has ended. The inner war between who you are and who you pretend to be is finally over. You walk through the world not as light or shadow, but as both, an integrated being, and in that wholeness you find a peace that no external validation can give, the quiet certainty that nothing within you is wasted. Not the pain, not the fear, not even the darkness, all of it belongs, and that belonging, that inner union, is true healing. And now, in the silence after the storm, you begin to feel what wholeness truly is. It is not the loud triumph of someone who has conquered their demons. It is the soft breathing of someone who has befriended them. Healing does not make you untouchable. It makes you real. It gives you back the full range of your humanity, your light and your darkness, your chaos and your calm. You still feel pain, but it no longer defines you. You still meet fear, but it no longer controls you. You still face loss, but you no longer lose yourself inside it, because you have learned to stand in the middle of opposites, between who you were and who you are becoming, between the wound and the wisdom it gave you. This is the quiet miracle of integration. You stop needing to be better and start remembering that you were always whole. Carl Jung. Philosophy calls this the return to the self. Not the ego, not the image, but the center of being that holds all things in balance. It is the place inside you that no longer splits life into good and bad, but simply says, "This too is me." When you reach this point, peace no longer feels like escape. It feels like honesty. It's the peace of someone who has stopped pretending. The peace of someone who can look at their reflection and no longer turn away. You understand now. Healing was never the path to softness, but to wholeness. Softness may come, yes, but it is not weakness. It is openness. It is the courage to feel deeply in a world that fears depth. It is the strength to stand unguarded in front of truth. You no longer chase the light. You carry it within your darkness. You no longer search for perfection. You rest in authenticity. And though the world may not see your transformation, it will feel it in the calmness of your presence, in the steadiness of your gaze, in the way you no longer rush to fix, to please, or to hide. You have come home to yourself. Not purified, but integrated. Not shining, but luminous. So when the night returns, and it always does, you will not be afraid, because you have already walked through it once, and you have learned the secret that changes everything. The light you seek was never separate from the darkness you feared. It was born within it. And now, so are you.